Okay. All right. So, hey guys, welcome back to Small Talk, small conversations with huge impact. And yeah, welcome to another episode. And I did not prepare my intro speech for this. No, this is actually a
That's
continuation
fine.
of our recording. I now have again one of my good friends online, Joyce Pring Triviño. Joyce, welcome to the show.
I'm glad to be back, Alec. Thank you for having me back.
Yeah. Okay. So if you guys haven't listened to our first episode, I recorded and we talked all about adulting. It's a very, very amazing episode. Go ahead and check it out. And yeah, you might probably be very interested and you've read the title for this podcast episode. And I pinilit ko talaga na dalawang episodes na yung ma-record kasi alam niyo naman, very busy si Joyce. Kaya sulitin na natin yung oras right now. And so for this episode, Joyce, I want to talk about relationships because we talked about adulting in the first phase, right? You like being responsible for your actions, for yourself. And now you hit this point where you are now with a very loving husband and a very, very, very cute kid. So I want to
Thank you.
talk all about relationships. Because we've seen how sobrang ako kinikilig talaga ako pag nakikita ko yung mga posts online.
Wow.
Sabi ko, I want that. Gusto ko niyan. Pero yan. So, I want to talk about relationships and love. But in the previous podcast episode, you also shared that you have a share of heartbreaks in your life. And so you went through a lot of process, and hopefully we can talk about that in this episode. But I want to start off this episode with a question. Um, when can you say that you are ready to be in a relationship?
When you're happy just being alone, that's when you know you're ready to be in a relationship. It's so cliche, right? Like everybody always. So, for those of you guys who don't know me, I am Joyce. I got married in 2019. My husband and I have been married for only 2 years. We have a 7-month-old beautiful baby boy named Eliam. My husband's name is Juancho. We were dating for only like 10 months, and then we got engaged. After 2 months of being engaged, we got married. It's a crazy ride, and we're still married. And I knew that I was ready to be in a relationship again because, before one show, Alec, I was a serial dater. Like, think of the most always my boyfriend friend that you have. That was me.
No way.
Yes, wait. I was a huge flirt and I always had a boyfriend. I like okay, here the thing was whenever I get single, literally next day may manliligaw na sa akin at may date na ako kaagad. So I was such a horrible person in that way. Like I would always break people's hearts because I was selfish. I would go into relationships because I wanted to feel good about myself. And that was a very toxic trait to have. And so after my last relationship, the one before Wancho, I decided, you know what? I'm going to stop doing that. I'm going to stop dating around. I'm going to stop trying to find happiness and fulfillment in relationships. And that's when I figured out that that's when you should be in a relationship. If you are fulfilled on your own, if you're happy by yourself, and if the relationship that you will be going into will just be an addition and an overflow of your love and happiness. Because if you go into a relationship, yes, Alec.
That's a really interesting take kasi parang the moment that you should be in a relationship is when you're not looking for a relationship. Like that's exactly
Yes.
what you're saying, right?
It's paradoxical. It feels so counterintuitive, right? Like, I should go into a relationship now because I want to be with someone. No. Be in a relationship when you literally can go without one. Because, okay, and here's the thing. Before, when I would go into a relationship, it affected me so much when my boyfriend doesn't reply to me or when he does things that irritate me or hurt me. Because my happiness is so hinged on him being the perfect or being the right person for me na, my goodness, pag hindi nag-work out tong relationship na to, saan ako pupulutin? 'Di ba? Sino ako kung wala ka? And when I realized that I was defining myself by this relationship, then that became toxic. That's why I would advise, if you want to go into a relationship, make sure first that you're happy on your own, that you have a good relationship with your family, with your
Yeah.
loved ones. You just you want an overflow, because that's a nice way to be in a
Mm-hmm.
relationship, right? Where the other person is just overflowing with joy and happiness. So he or she just wants to give it to you. You want to receive that kind of love. So be that kind of love to someone.
Yeah, you mentioned about the thing where you take care of your family or you build those other relationships and you feel that overflow and you spent some time being single and then you worked your way, can I say, you worked your way in, I'm okay with not being in a relationship, right? Can you tell us what are some things that you did? What are some inner work that you did that allowed you to feel that way or be in that state now? Okay, I don't need any relationships anymore, but whatever happens, happens.
Yeah, you know what? I was talking to God that time. Alex, sabi ko, Lord, ayoko na mag-asawa. Hindi ko na kailangan. Sobrang saya ko na. Ang saya. Ang saya maging single. Andun ako sa point na yun. Tapos, bang, biglang may one shot. Ano ba yun? As in, Alec, I was planning on like moving out of the country. I was so happy. I said, I'm so happy now with my career. I'm gonna move to New York. I'm gonna try a different job. I'm gonna be a writer. I'm gonna work in the museum. As in, ganun na yung thinking ko. By 2021, yun yung plano ko. Kasi my contract with my network at that time ended in 2021. So sabi ko, by the time that it ends, I'm gonna fly out and leave all of this behind and just do whatever I want with my life because I don't want to get married anymore. And before I had that, the lead up to that was a conscious effort to not date anyone, because I knew that if I did, I was just gonna ruin their life with my with my unpacked baggages. So, in-unpack ko muna yung mga baggages ko. I started with, seeing a psychiatrist. I started with, actually, the first thing that I did was I started really connecting, as I mentioned in our first episode together, with my relationship with God. I became super connected in my local church. I started serving in Sunday school. I had like a group of friends that I would go to Bible studies with on Mondays. I reconnected with my best friends and I would spend my weekends with them. I would travel with them. I traveled on my own so much. Like, I went to different countries. I traveled through the UK, through Europe, through New York. I studied. I did everything that I wanted to do to improve myself. I read so much books. I spent so much time with my family. And anytime that I felt lonely, I tried to divert that attention and that love to someone else. And I got a dog. I'm serious. I was like, kailangan ko ng affection. Nami-miss kong may kahag. Kuha na lang ako ng aso. I'm serious, that's how Bowie came about. So that's how I got Bowie. I got Bowie at the peak of my, like, adulting, being single, and being a non-problematic person. So that's what I did. It's a lot of time just investing in myself.
I that just makes perfect sense. I was reading a book, Single on Purpose. And sabi niya doon na parang kasi mahirap i-define yung ano mong gagawin mo pag single ka. Pero sinabi doon na you need to take care of yourself. And taking care of yourself, parang it requires to take care of four different aspects. Your body, your mind, your heart, and then your soul. Right? And you did that. You did all
That's
of
pretty
them.
much what I did.
You did
Yeah.
all of them. Like, connect ka, you built this personal connection with God, and you went to a therapist. You also had friends, and also you had a dog, like that physical thing. But it just shows na, alam mo yun, na marami ka talagang kailangan munang gawin before, and were these something, or were these things na talagang um, sinabi mo na, or parang meron ka bang benchmark na parang kasi gagawin ko muna to bago ako pumasok sa isang relationship, or ano yung approach mo nun, o parang sabi mo na ayoko na talaga, tapos eto, focus na lang ako sa sarili ko, 100% sa sarili ko.
Yeah, it was more of like, okay, benchmark in the sense na I want to focus on these things first and I'm not going and I will make my standards really, 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 really high. And when and that's the thing, when you're happy on your own, when you're secure, when you've filled yourself up with the things that you need to fill yourself up before going into a relationship, hindi ka matatakot to lose the people that you like. And I realized that na the reason why I would have toxic relationships before is because I try to always adjust to the other person. Kasi takot ako na if I have certain standards, if I ask them for too much, ayaw na nila sa akin. Pero when I was filling myself up with so many good things and Wancho came about, I was like, wag mo na akong ligawan kasi ayokong mag-date for dating lang. Gusto ko yung magpapakasal na ako in like 3 years. As in, ganun, Alec. Like, I've known the guy for 2 months. Tapos yun na yung pinag-uusapan namin na, sorry, ayoko mag-boyfriend kung ayaw mong magpakasal in 2 years. Ganun na yung conversation namin. But I had that boldness because I knew what I deserved. I already knew that the relationships that I had before was not meeting my standards for what would make me happy. But I stayed in those relationships because I was afraid to lose the person that I liked. Not knowing that I was serving myself short. Na I deserved better. I could do better. But I stuck around because I was so afraid that I couldn't find any better. So I found that better with myself. And then I felt so fulfilled. And it wasn't hard anymore to set boundaries. I said, I don't want to do this before marriage. I don't want to date just for dating. I don't want to, I don't want to deal with miscommunications. I don't want to deal with like someone who doesn't want to bet on me the way that I will bet on that person. I want to be pursued as a woman. And I set those boundaries and had those really high standards and asked a lot from Wancho, but only because I knew I had a lot of things to offer as well. So, it's kind of a benchmark, I guess, but at the same time I was open to it kasi syempre sabi ko hindi na ako magbo-boyfriend, ayoko na. But I mean, guwapo si Wancho. So, when he came about, I was like, but I was also open to it. Diba? But I still had, it doesn't stop. The growing and the self-care and the taking care of yourself doesn't stop, but there is a certain level of healthiness that you have to attain first, I feel like, before you get into a relationship.
Yeah, okay. So you mentioned you have this standards, which of course naabot ni Juancho. Can you tell how about when you were still in that dating phase? I'm interested in that because feeling ko yung mga tao na hindi nila na-realize na ganun pala yung ginagawa nila. What were your standards back then? What were your bounds? How were you were you able to set boundaries back in the dating phase? What was the main difference talaga in terms of setting boundaries and setting standards from you being in that phase and now that you know what you're worth, you know what you deserve? What are some standards and boundaries na nag-iba?
I think, Alec, when you start dating in the modern dating world, you take what's given to you. Right? Like, kung ano yung kayang i-offer nung guy or nung girl, dun ka lang. So, sorry, I can't. Hindi siya mahiling mag-text or ayaw niya i-post sa social media, whatever the thing that they want. You take it. That's all you get from the relationship. But I realized that I wanted more, and I only figured that out when I had spent so much time by myself. And yung mga na-realize ko na bagay, for example, as a Christian at that time, one, I didn't want to date for the sake of dating. I wanted to date with the purpose of marriage in mind. So, that was the first thing that I said to Wancho. Do you really want to pursue me? Kasi manliligaw siya eh. Do you really want to pursue me? Because if you really want to pursue me, one, I can't be with anyone who doesn't have a personal relationship with God. Is that something that you want to look into and pursue? And so he did. He started going to church on his own, started joining a Bible study group on his own, while we were also trying to figure out our dating. That's one. The second one was, I said na, I don't want to date nga, na wala lang. I don't want to wait for 5 years. My plan in my head is like 2 to 3 years, ready na ako magpakasal. So, financially, emotionally, physically, spiritually, ready na ako. I need to be with someone who's also like that. Is that something that you see yourself doing? And funny enough, he apparently told his friends also na yung next girlfriend niya, gusto niya yung
Yeah.
mapapakasal niya na din. So, nagready na rin pala siya. Nagre-ready na din siya for that part of his life. So, we were like, okay, we're on the same page. We want this thing to happen. So, I guess that's how it happened. I started to lay down the things that I wanted to do. And I wanted what I saw myself having and doing for the next few years. I also set boundaries like, you're not, for example, I wanted to stay pure before marriage. Ganyan. And that was such a foreign concept to Wancho because he wasn't a Christian at that time, but he agreed to it. And so I was like, okay, sige, you agree to it, then fine. And we started pursuing the relationship intentionally. Because sometimes I feel like a lot of us, and definitely this was something that I did before, we go into relationships just to feel good because it feels good. But when you really think about it, relationships aren't just about your emotions and your feelings. It's also about who you want to be and how you want your life to go. Kasi it's the most important relationship of your life. Really. Apart from God, the next is your partner in life, your spouse. Whoever you marry will really drastically dictate how successful, how happy, how healthy you are in all aspects. Like, alam mo, Alec, pag si Wancho, hindi siya nagda-diet at kumakain ng maayos. Ako rin. Damay ako. Damay ako sa unhealthy food. Damay ako sa hindi pag-workout. Because you're so intertwined.
Ah.
'Di ba? So, ayun.
Yeah, I just want to ask, baka napag-usapan niyo to ni Wancho. When you were dating, did Wancho have any standards or boundaries that he laid out as well? Or sa babae lang nanggagaling yung ganong aspect?
No, I think it should come from both sides naman. I believe that both men and women have the right to set boundaries. And here's the thing. There are certain boundaries na you have to meet in the middle. Like, you can meet in the middle. Hindi naman kailangan na porke ako lang yung may gusto. Like, one show at some point in a relationship went, I want to try and go to church on my own so that I know that I'm doing this for myself and not for you. And I respected him so much for that. When he told me that na ayoko na mag-church kasama ka kasi baka ginagawa ko lang tong Jesus thing na to para sa'yo. Pero it's such an important part of my life. So I'm gonna try and see if I can do this, if I want to do this also for myself. And that was so beautiful. I was so proud of him for doing that. It made me even more in love with him kasi he had integrity. Na I'm not just gonna do certain things because that's your boundary. This is my boundary. I want to see if this is also for myself. And so he did that. Other things that he would do, I guess, boundaries niya is like really having open relationships with his family. His family is such an integral part of who he is. And so, one of the first things that we did was really just getting to know his family. I had to, make time to spend time with his family and get to know his family as well. So definitely, it should come from both sides because you both have a lot to go through to offer also. Hold on I feel like my baby is crying.
Sige lang,
Can you
go
just
ahead.
pause 1 minute? You don't have to stop the recording.
Yeah.
Wait lang. Sorry. Love? Bob?
So we were talking about how important boundary setting is, setting your standards and making sure that it's not only from one part or one person from the relationship. It needs to be coming from both. And so I want to ask now, because you went into the relationship with Wancho knowing what you want, right? Knowing your standards, knowing your boundaries, and setting them and being strict with them. And then you blended together very well. But I'm just really interested kung meron bang nag-iba with the stages nung kinasal ka na and during nung dating stage pa lang kayo.
Oh my gosh, everything changes when you
We're
get married. It gets worse.
and
Just kidding.
my follow-up question on that would be, how do you think um, people can protect and take care of their relationship during the dating stage and also during the married life?
Oh my gosh. Great question, but really, really, really difficult to unpack. Only because it's, again, a case to case basis. Wherein,
Mhm.
again, it has to depend on what you both value as individuals. And then now you have to also decide what you will value as part of the relationship. So for both
Mhm.
Wancho and I, the very beginning of the relationship palang, we already knew that what we valued most was our relationship with God. So Christ-centered na kaagad yung relationship namin. And that was how we took care of uh, our relationship when we were still dating, and that's still how we take care of our relationship now that we're married. Pero kasi when you're still dating and you're not yet married, your priorities could still be your individual goals. And here's what I mean by that. It means na pag hindi pa kayo kasal, meron pa kayong leeway to really focus just on what you want as an individual. At madami ka pang chances and times na pwede mong sabihin, sorry, I'm not willing to do that because this is what I want, particularly in my
Mhm.
life. I'm gonna say no to that. Pero when you're married, you always have to make decisions as one. It lessens the complications in that way. For us as a family, ang rule namin ngayon, ang priorities namin, laging sinasabi sa amin ng mentors namin, it's like your fingers. So the first one is God, your personal relationship with God, your relationship as a family with God. Pangalawa, yung spouse mo na. So it your spouse goes above your career, it goes above your individual things, it goes above even your relationship with your parents or your friends or other family members. Your spouse always comes first. After that are your children. You have to prioritize then your children. After that, tsaka lang papasok yung career. Tapos after pa nun, tsaka lang papasok yung ministry, friends, other stuff that you want to do. So it's so different when you're married because there are a lot of sacrifices that you need to make if you really want to make the relationship works. It's hard. It's hard work. Marriage is a lot of hard work. You know, on the first year of our marriage, the pandemic broke out and we went into marriage counseling. Like, first, we weren't even a year married, like siguro 4 or 5 months married. It was so different to live with someone, to have this pressure of I cannot separate from this person because I made a covenant between God and this person that I will love them for the rest of our lives. It was so much pressure. And then add that to the pandemic, to like, iba na yung ugali ng tao pag nasa isang bahay na kayo. It's so different. And that's one thing that I really, really learned. We both learned on the first year of our marriage. And we asked for help. We wanted to marriage counseling. There was no shame in it. Feeling ko kasi pag dating pa lang, madami pang cutesy part eh. May mga pabebe parts pa kayo. Di ba? Medyo meron ka pang mga bagay na you can withhold on your own. And hindi pa ma-reveal yun sa partner mo. Pero pagkasal na kayo, Alec, lahat ng hang-ups, lahat ng baggage mo, but also lahat ng beauty about you will come out. So, it's very, very different.
Okay, so my next question, because we talked about boundary setting, we talked about standards, and here's a question that a lot of people entering dating, or at least found themselves dating someone unexpectedly, even, are the red flags, right? And I had this question. I think it was last week. My friend and I were talking about it, and the red flags, kapag simula ka pa lang, yung ibang tao, totally talagang tatakbuhan na, iiwan. Stay away from it. Wala na. Pero were there times na, okay, this is a red flag, but we can work, we can work towards it? Because I think it's really not black and white. I mean, there are special cases, or I think there's another layer that we need to unpack with the red flag. So, what are you think, or what's your stand on red flags? So, do you think we should avoid them completely, or how do we handle them?
I think it really depends on what the red flags are. So, first and foremost, you have to know what are your non-negotiables. Dapat alam mo
Mhm.
kasi yung mga non-negotiables mo na you cannot for the life of you deal with. And then there are also certain things na negotiable naman. Okay, that could be a red flag, but it's something that you're willing to work through with your partner. That's one. Second, what kind of person are you dating? Like, do you see that this person is someone who has history? History in the sense na meron pa siyang childhood trauma or past experiences that have resulted to those particular red flags. And if so, are they the type of person that's willing to address it and acknowledge that it exists? Because I think the reason why certain red flags become super dangerous is because they're red flags in someone who's not willing to acknowledge that that's a red flag. That's something that they need to address and deal with. 'Di ba? Nagiging dangerous red flag lang naman siya pag yung tao sobrang stubborn na, I don't even see that. That's not a problem that I deal with. What are you talking about? But if you're dating someone who's actually self-aware enough to say, you know what? Thank you for pointing that out. That
Mhm.
is something that I do have to work on and deal with. And that's a main difference, right? Dating someone who's willing to acknowledge the red flag that they have. So there are certain red flags that I would say are truly, truly off limits. Like, for example, may asawa. Obviously. Like, or coming, like, overlap ng relationships. I
Uh-huh.
honestly believe from personal experience and also from so many countless friends of mine, if they cheat with you, they're probably willing to cheat on you. So, whether that's a boyfriend, girlfriend, or just steer away from that because one, it's also a seed eh. 'Di ba may seed of mistrust and
Mhm.
doubt. Mag-uumpisa yun doon. So that's a non-negotiable red flag for me. It could be nothing for some other people, right? So alam ko yung mga non-negotiable red flags ko. That's one. Another one would be if sobrang egoistic niya or wala siyang magawa kundi to talk about himself, right? That's a red flag. That's non-negotiable for me. I cannot for the life of me deal with someone who's like that. But there are certain people who like that. I know someone who particularly likes it that the partner that they have just constantly talks about himself because she's the type of person that just likes to listen, So try to figure out what are your non-negotiable red flags and steer clear and away from that. And then figure out ano may mga negotiable ones mo. Pag alam mo na yung negotiable ones mo, ask yourself, is the person that I'm dating someone who's willing to acknowledge and accept and change that maybe in the future? Not for
Mhm.
you, but for himself or herself, for their betterment? Yes or no? So, does that make sense? Diba?
Yeah, it does make sense. And I just love how you pointed out na kasi ngayon, pag nakita natin sa TikTok, pag nakita natin sa Instagram, oh, red flag, okay, ayoko, steer away from that. Pero we don't realize na sometimes the red flags are, we decide, what flag or what red flags do we need to avoid. It's totally up to us. And you mentioned nga na ang galing nun sa, for example, yung iba very medyo egotistical or very, he likes to talk about himself. And then you enjoy that. You enjoy just listening to
Mm.
what he's trying to say, what he's talking about, and then you can make it work. And so I think it's very important that we know that it all really depends on you. I think before you look for what red flags you need to avoid, you need to decide like what do you value in a relationship and what are the non-negotiables na talagang hindi pwede. And meron mga general pero more importantly the red flags it can be derived from the non-negotiables that you set. But I just want to ask a little bit more about setting boundaries kasi it's such a big thing when you suddenly become single and you're now dating and like alam natin to set boundaries, set your standards, pero it's how how do you do that, how do you set your boundaries and how do you make sure na those boundaries are followed?
Communication.
Uh-huh.
Same old simple communication. But it all starts with first knowing who you are, right? What are the things that are your non negotiables? What are the things that you cannot stand? What are the things that you, without a doubt, believe in? What are the things that you value most? Start with yourself. Again, like what you mentioned, right? You cannot know what the red flags are and what the things that you don't want if you don't first know what are the things that you like, what are the things that you're gunning for and that you want to pursue, what do you want to get out of the relationship, and what are you willing to give to the relationship. And really figure that out for yourself first. Second, yun nga, you have to communicate constantly your boundaries and just be honest. I think sometimes the reason why we would get into toxic relationships is because one person or both people refuse to just be completely honest in communicating the things that they like or the things that they don't like just because they're afraid of offending the other person. But in
Mm.
reality, if you want to have the liberty to be able to think and freely love, you have to be able to offend. At some point ha, ma-offend mo
Mm-hmm.
yung tao eh.
Mm-hmm.
Minsan nakaka-offend na, yan yung boundary mo? Talaga ba? Yan yung gusto mong mangyari? Talaga ba yan yung hinihingi mo sa akin? But sometimes, you'll get really, really blessed that at some point, you'll meet someone who's willing to meet you with those boundaries, who's willing to tell you what's wrong. So, of personal experience, for example, I'm gonna tell you the story of how Juancho was visiting me one time in my condo. We had lunch. And after we had lunch, he had to go back to La Salle because he was still studying at that time. So without my knowledge, because I already know that he was gonna leave kasi nga, syempre may school siya, diba? He booked a Grab without telling me. So hindi niya sinabi na aalis na siya. Ang sinabi niya lang, nung dumating na yung Grab, tsaka niya sinabi, oy, andyan na yung Grab ko, I'm gonna go now. And I threw a fit, as in full on breakdown na umiyak ako. Galit na galit ako sa kanya. Like, why did you do this? La 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 la. Ganun. As in talagang nagwala ako. And instead of walking away and getting so mad at me, Juancho sat me down and he said, what's really going on? Why are you crying? What's causing? Can you try and ask yourself, why are you so angry at me? Because you already know that I need to go to school. You already know that this is my schedule. Can you ask yourself why? And that afternoon, we unpacked na meron akong abandonment issues from when my parents separated without telling us, my sibling and myself. And so you see how it's a bit of both things, right? It's one, si Juancho being able to like set the boundaries. See that red flag of me na, oh my gosh, anong nangyayari dito sa babaeng to? Sobrang baliw. And then deciding for himself na, you know what? Maybe there's something else there. Maybe, and he was compassionate enough. So find someone who's compassionate enough to understand that you're a human being who's gone through a lot of things. So I guess it's that. It's the constant communication, and that's what I find in our relationship. You can keep setting boundaries, yes, but as human beings, we will keep disappointing one another and we'll keep
Mm.
doing things that hurt each other. So the thing that you can do, only thing that you can do to always make sure that your relationship won't fall apart is to just try and communicate. And then at some point, 'di ba, magko-communicate kayo, marirealize nyo na, Alec, hindi ko na kaya. Hindi ko na, eto na
Mm.
yung end ng capability ko to deal with your history and your baggage. So, I'm sorry, I'm gonna have to walk away from the relationship. Or, it could be that, you know what, I'm willing to go to the ends of the earth and make adjustments and try and help you grow through this season and this hurt and this trauma and this experience of your life. And that only happens through communication. Lastly, sorry, I said so many things. I'm so long winded.
It's okay. It's okay.
Cut
I
mo na
love
to.
it. Like giving the full context of, the short answer, like giving it everything. Thank you so much for doing that, Joyce. Go ahead.
Diba? Might as well. I mean, if you're gonna give something, give your best.
Yeah.
No, but the three things that we always ask ourselves on our date nights, Juancho and I, and we constantly talk about this. How have I hurt you this week? Will you forgive me?
Mm.
And how can I do better? So, three questions. How have I hurt you? Will you forgive me? And how can I be better? Simple, straightforward, and honest, knowing that I have hurt you, I'm sure. Like small things, big things. Will you forgive me for being human and not meeting your needs all the time because we are human? And third, how can we be better, both as individuals and as, a part of this marriage and this relationship? So, yun.
Yeah. I mean, that's very beautiful. I think thank you for also sharing that those set of questions. And I think that's very important. Having that date night or at least that parang mental health checkup or
Mm-hmm.
like the relationship checkup once a month or like twice a month. It's really really important kasi as we all know, our communication is very important, but we don't become intentional with our communication. So I think setting a day can really help you, really digest what's happening inside the relationship, right? And I also love what you said about boundaries and how Juancho and you, approach those kinds of scenarios where you really, um, those times now you are human, you are not really acting at your best interest. Na, alam mo yun, a lot of things to unpack. And I think I read something that's really lovely as well. It said when someone is sharing you their boundaries, it's not them pushing you away. It's them trying to keep you in their lives.
Mm-hmm.
It's like letting them know now, okay, this is my boundary, and maybe we could talk about this. Maybe we could work through this, and that just I think what I love about having those kinds of conversations is that you have a choice whether you would allow that or you would walk away and the tension between that scenario would increase, or you would allow yourself to compromise or be in that or create that space. Now we could try to talk about it, we could try to work it out, and then you create these two worlds emerging,
Mm-hmm.
and you would now see a better perspective on what is really happening,
Yeah.
right? I mean, it's such a simple thing to do. Na you allow yourself to communicate, just settle down the emotions, try to figure out what's really happening, but it really helps the relationship a lot, big time.
Mm.
And so again, thank you so much for sharing that. And now I want to ask, because a lot of people might be listening to this now. Okay, that's amazing. Now I have ideas on how I can take care of my relationship, or how can I approach dating people. But let's say, for example, someone who had a bad experience in a relationship from their past relationships, and now they're scared to open their hearts. Now they're scared to talk to other people. How do you think they could deal with that?
Man, that's hard. It's hard because it's hard to deal with trauma, right? When you experience it, it's so real, and it kind of taints all the other relationships that you would go into. But one of the best advice that I've ever gotten before was to stop. Sorry, I need to try and put this together in my head properly. What was it that Aaron said? Stop trying to punish the people in your life right now for the sins of the people in your life from before.
Wow.
And that hit me, bro. I was like, wow, that is so. Whew, that was so heavy. Like, stop trying to punish people in your life right now for the sins of the people from your life before. And that that takes a lot of courage, because that means that you're gonna deal with your own hurt, because it's not the fault of the person that you're in the relationship with right now, right? That meron kang crappy history from another person. So you have to deal with your own hurt and face the reality that there are people who have hurt you in the past, horrible people who have taken advantage of you and have been dishonest with you, but you're now in a new season of your life. And this person deserves your clean slate. Are you willing to give that person, the person in your life right now, your clean slate? Because if you're not, is it even worth getting into a relationship? Because if you're gonna give that person the plate that still has leftovers from your past relationship, why would they want to stay there? Why would you even give your plate to that person, diba? So clean your slate, clean your plate first bago mo ibigay dun sa next person. And I don't mean na kailangan na figure out mo na lahat ng mga hurts mo, 'di ba, na wala ka ng trauma, wala ka ng issues, but at least be open about it. And an example that I could give you is that I had to open up to Wancho. I wasn't a very good communicator. Every time that we had an argument, I wanted to leave. I always said, "No, let's just break up. I don't want to talk to you." And there came a point where we had to really meet in the middle, and I had to tell him, "I'm sorry. I don't know how to communicate with high emotions. I've never been able to do that properly in my family life, not in my romantic life. So let's meet halfway. You know, let me let's just take 30 minutes, an hour, 2 hours off before we talk, and then we can talk." Instead of just like, "Hindi, ngayon na pag-usapan natin." Hindi ko kaya yun eh. So, let's meet in the middle, di ba? Bigyan mo ka ng 2 hours, then we can talk. It's either that or we don't talk at all the entire day, di ba? Kasi ganun yung gusto ko. So, just give me a few hours and try to like figure out myself. So, I think it's that eh. I think it's really just knowing and understanding and being compassionate enough and communicating again. Like, this is what I went through. And I'm not gonna try and I don't want to punish you for the sins of my past, but you have to sometimes deal with the repercussions of the bad decisions that other people in my past made. But I'm willing to work that with you. You know, so
Yeah. Yeah, thank you for that. I think what I really love about what you said is it's really about taking care or looking out for the other person and not entirely looking out for the relationship. I think that's two completely different things.
that's a good point.
Parang yung ibang tao, no, we gotta save the relationship, and so they're gonna impose their truth or how they think what's gonna help the relationship versus looking at the situation and prioritizing how can I help the other person, not trying to save the relationship. Kasi yung iba, parang sabihin nila na, okay, we need communication on this, so we need to talk about this. Pero are you really looking at how do the other person wants to communicate? Versus okay, this is what I read and this is what what we should apply. And so I think that's a different approach, and thank you so much for pointing that out. I think a lot of people needed to hear that na, and I guess that's really boiling down from, are you acting out of love or are you acting out of a personal gain or something like that, because you're gonna get something out of it, like, because this is my relationship, I need to take care of it. But are you really doing it out of love? And love is something that you give, you try to you do it selflessly, right? You don't look at what are you gonna gain from it. You're just looking at how can you help the other person, how can you take care and love the other person. So yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. And probably one of my last questions, because we talked about a lot of relationships, being single, and I guess one of my nawala yung thought process ko.
That's okay. Happens to me all the
Yeah.
time. Oh my
Yeah. Wait nga
Tell
lang.
me about it.
Yeah, I guess that's it. Those are the questions that those are the topics that I really wanted to talk about. So my last question would be, if people are going to take into account the things that we talked about here in the podcast, na okay, like relationships require a lot of self-work. That's the theme that I'm
Yes.
getting at. Like, it requires a lot of self-work. How can I make sure, or what are some practical ways that I take care of myself, and I know myself better so that when the right one comes, I am prepared?
Great question. Like my dad always said to me before, don't worry about Mr. Right coming. Just be busy becoming Mrs. Right. And I was like, that's so cliche, but okay, dad, that does make sense, because sometimes the right person comes along, but you're not the right person for that right person because you're not ready yet. And I think the practical things that I did, we've already talked about it intensely in the importance of self-care, the importance of mindfulness, really being mindful of who you are, what you want to become, and what you envision your life to be, and how you want your relationship to be. It really really starts from there. I not only The practical things that I did was, one, again, I went to church. I got my personal relationship with God. That's the book that you've been reading, Alec. It's a lot of spiritual work. Second, I addressed the mental health issues that I had. I dealt with my depression and my anxiety on my own. I figured out where my hurts, my insecurities, especially figure out where your insecurities, your trauma, and your difficulties in communicating and being open and vulnerable, where are they coming from, and try to address that, because it's really important to be able to be open and figure that out before you get into a relationship. Third, find and be connected and rooted in healthy relationships with other
Mm.
people, with friends, with mentors, with coaches, with family members. Root your love in other people, because if you don't have those special things and people who, support you and care for you and are thoughtful towards you and love you outside of your romantic relationship, you're gonna put the pressure on your partner to be all that for you. And guess what?
Mm.
Your partner cannot be your best friend, your teacher, your coach, your mentor, your parent.
Wow.
That's not their job. Their job is to be your partner, to be your lover, to be your spouse. It's not their job to be everybody else in your life. And I know that's like so counterintuitive, because when you're in a relationship, diba, you feel like hindi, dapat siya yung lahat. He or she doesn't have to be all that. Could be little bits of that. Of course, they motivate you, they become your best friend, they become your whatever, foodie buddy, whatever. But they're not all that for you. That's a lot of pressure to put on someone. And finally, be always open and curious to learn from every situation and every experience and every book and every podcast and every YouTube video that you can find. Because at the end of the day, if you stop being curious and being open about learning things about yourself and how to better have human connection with other people, you'll not only have horrible romantic relationships, you'll also have difficult and horrible friendships and family relationships and work relationships. All of these things. I think sometimes the difficulty and the complication that we have is we separate romantic relationships from all other types of human
Mm.
connection relationships, when in reality, it's the same. It's the same level at some point, and in the beginning, when you're dating. Of course, when you're married, that's different, but it's the same in that it requires a lot of work. Makikisama ka, kailangan mong maging open to and open for suggestions, open to communication, para kang may boss, para kang may coworker, all of these things, diba? So try and not separate it. Human connection is human connection at the end of the day. It just finds different forms and different ways to go about it. So that would be my advice.
Yeah, that's there's a lot of things to unpack, but I think you said it very perfectly, and I just want to really highlight, um, you know, talking about how your relationship with your spouse is in a dynamic sense. It's still the same with the relationships that you have with other people. And I find it hard that people would like to fixate. Now, I'll be a better boyfriend or girlfriend if they can't, nurture the relationships that we had. So I think we need to do some self-assessment and look at the relationships that we have right now and how we can we take care of them. And then when the right one comes, or when you're dating again, when you find yourself dating again unexpectedly, then you can apply how you take care of the other relationships that you have, because eventually it will be replicated with the romantic relationships that you're gonna have. Yeah. So yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. And this has been amazing. I have enjoyed recording these two episodes with you. Again, if you guys haven't listened to the episode about adulting, go listen to that. And so I cannot thank you enough, and I cannot say how grateful I am for your time. I know you're a very occupied woman, but thank you so much for sharing all the things that you shared today. And I hope that we can reach more people with your message and with your truth. So thank you again, Joyce, for being here.
Thank you, Alec. Always, always grateful to have you and to have conversations with you. And I can't wait to do this again soon, hopefully on my podcast, if not
Yes.
here. Thank you for having me.
Yes, lovely. So I'll link the social media accounts of Joyce. You can check her out in the description box below. And if you like this episode, go ahead and share this on your Instagram or whatever. And you can tag me at Alec Cuenca, and tag Joyce at Joyce Pring. And we would love to hear your comments, your insights, and your questions if you have any. I'll forward them to Joyce if you have any. And so share this with your family, share this with your loved ones, share this with anyone who is looking out there to date and to build better relationships with themselves and with other people. And with that, I just want to thank you guys for listening. My name is Alec Cuenca. This is Small Talk, small conversations with huge impact. Sorry, I got lost for a moment. Small conversations with huge impact. And I'll talk to you guys next episode. Bye bye.